Last week, we exposed the top 3 Bible verses Christians misunderstand about money. We broke down some myths, and I can see in the comments, people were shocked. They said, I've heard that verse my entire life and never realized it was being misused. And that's the power of truth that sets you free. But here's the thing, if all we do is tear down false beliefs, we're just left with this blank space. God doesn't just want you empty of lies. He wants you full of His truth. So today we're going to go even deeper and discover God's blueprint for wealth. Because when you understand His design, you'll stop starving, you'll stop fearing, and you'll start living in the abundance that lasts. So let's start in the very beginning and understanding this covenant of wealth. In Genesis chapter 12, we can read about God's promise to Abraham. He says, I will bless you, and all peoples of the earth will be blessed through you. Notice the Lord didn't say to Abraham that I'm going to bless you for your own comfort, but instead He said, I will bless you so that others will be blessed through you. And that is the key to this blueprint. Wealth was never about one person hoarding, but it was about the blessing flowing outward. So when you fast forward in Deuteronomy 8 and 18, it says, remember that it is the Lord that gives you the power to produce wealth. And so it is through this that He confirms His covenant. Please understand that wealth is not luck, regardless of what people say. And it's definitely not just hard work, but it is God Himself that gives us the ability to produce it. And it also confirms His covenant. And Paul ties it all up in Galatians 3:29. He says, if you belong to Christ, then you are Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. So that same covenant that was applied to Abraham, it applies to you right now through Jesus Christ. So here's the second part that you have to understand, is stewardship in action. What is that? So if covenant is the foundation, then that must mean that stewardship is how we live it out. We can even think about Joseph. Pharaoh hands him this authority, and Joseph doesn't waste it. He learns to multiply resources, stores up grain, and turns this crisis into provisions for entire nations. That's stewardship. And what about Solomon? He asked for wisdom above riches. And then God gives him both because he was asking not for himself, but he was asking God for the wisdom to help him rule God's people. Because wisdom perceives wealth. Because God knows that wealth without wisdom destroys. But wealth with wisdom actually multiplies. You see, Jesus teaches this too in the parable of the talents. The servant that hid his money was rebuked. Why? Because God does not honor fear-based stewardship, but instead God honors multiplication. A poverty mindset says, I better bury this so I don't lose it. But kingdom stewardship says, I'll multiply what He gave me so it blesses more people. So let's see how Jesus reframes wealth. If you notice, Jesus never condemned wealth itself, but what He did condemn was misplaced priorities. When He multiplied the loaves and fishes, He proved that God's kingdom does not operate through scarcity, but instead it runs on overflow. We can even look at the time where Jesus washed the disciples' feet. It is in that moment where He actually redefined leadership, not lording over others, but instead serving with what you have. When Jesus says, seek first the kingdom of heaven and all these things will be added, He showed us that wealth flows through alignment and definitely not the other way around. So what Jesus actually did was reframed wealth as a tool. In His hands, provision multiply to meet needs and build faith. And that is exactly what wealth is supposed to look like in your life. Not just paying bills, but multiplying kingdom impact. So now I want to share with you my personal light bulb moment. Years ago, I thought I had it all figured out. I had business success, money coming in, and people looking at me like I was winning. But I lay down one night and I felt empty. It was like running on a treadmill. It was lots of effort, but felt like I was getting nowhere. And I kept thinking, if I just hit my next goal, then I should feel fulfilled, right? But every single time I hit it, the emptiness stayed. Then one day I felt like God asked me a question that will forever change my life. He asked me, whose blueprint are you building on? Yours or mine? And that was my light bulb moment. I realized that I was just chasing my own plans, but ignoring His very covenant. And my surrender question was this: How do you define wealth, God? And then suddenly it felt like all the pieces were clicking together. Wealth wasn't about me, it was about stewardship, legacy, and obedience. And that's when I felt that heaviness just lift off of me. I finally felt at peace where I wasn't chasing money anymore, but instead I learned how to partner with God's design. So here's the $1 million question. So how do you apply God's blueprint to your life? And I want you to write down these 4 steps. Number 1, you must renew your mind daily. Romans 12:2 says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Fill your thoughts with God's truth and abundance. Number 2, see yourself as a steward, not as an owner. In Psalms 24:1 says that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. To say it simply, you are entrusted to manage, not to hoard. Number 3, multiply what's in your hand right now. And don't fall for the trap that says, oh, someday I'll do that. Because the seed that God placed in your hand right now is enough for God to multiply. Number 4, align your wealth with kingdom purpose. Matthew 6:33 says, seek his kingdom first, and the provision will follow. And this is not about a get-rich scheme. It's simply about stepping into the flow of God's covenant, learning to steward wisely, and multiplying for his glory. So if you feel like this message helped you realize that you've been living life through the wrong blueprint, the good news is that you can actually shift right now. I created a free biblical wealth starter kit to help renew your foundation. And I'm going to have a link below so you can download it now. But if you know it's time for you to go into even a deeper transformation, or you align mindset, your stewardship, and your purpose, then join me in the Aligned and Abundant Intensive. And that's where I'll walk you step by step into God's abundance. And thank you again for sticking to the end of this video. Make sure you like and subscribe, hit that little bell button. It's going to help me create more content like this just for you. And make sure you share this video with someone that you know that needs a blueprint change in their life. God bless, and I'll catch you next video.